the Pizzly Bear, an animal that shouldn't exist. As Arctic ice disappears, two predators that once lived in separate worlds are beginning to meet. The polar bear and the grizzly bear. What happens when these giants cross paths? The answer surprised scientists around the world. In April 2006, a hunter named Jim Martell flew into the Canadian Arctic. He had a legal permit to hunt one polar bear. Near Banks Island, deep in the Northwest Territories, he found his target and took the shot. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary polar bear kill. But wildlife officials who examined the body noticed something was off. The fur was cream white, like a polar bear's, but scattered with brown patches. The claws were unusually long. The back had a distinct hump. Its face looked shallow, almost dish-shaped, nothing like a typical polar bear's profile. Officials seized the animal and sent tissue samples for genetic testing. The results came back and confirmed something remarkable. This was not a polar bear at all. It was a hybrid, half polar bear, half grizzly, the first hybrid of its kind ever confirmed in the wild. Today, we're going to dig into exactly what this animal is, where it came from, how many actually exist, and what it might really be telling us. This is the story of the Pizzly Bear. To understand this hybrid, we have to go back decades earlier, long before that hunter ever pulled the trigger. In 1936, at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, a male polar bear somehow got into a female grizzly's enclosure. The two mated, and 3 cubs were born. At the time, this was mostly treated as an odd accident, but those cubs grew into adults, and eventually, they bred with each other. That single detail mattered enormously. Most animal hybrids are born sterile, unable to reproduce at all. This lineage proved that polar bear and grizzly hybrids could reproduce successfully across multiple generations. Polar bears and grizzlies share a relatively recent common ancestor, and their genetics remain compatible enough to interbreed. Decades later, in 2004, a German zoo in Osnabrück documented 2 more hybrid cubs, born from bears kept together in the same enclosure. So scientists already knew this crossbreeding was biologically possible. What nobody had confirmed until 2006 was whether it was actually happening out in the wild. That hunter's bear changed everything. DNA testing traced its mother to a polar bear and its father to a grizzly. It was undeniable proof that these 2 species were meeting and mating without any human involvement at all. In the years that followed, researchers went looking for more, and they found them. As of the most recent count, scientists have confirmed 8 wild hybrid bears total. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting. All 8 of them trace back to a single female polar bear. The first 4 hybrids identified were what scientists call first generation, or F1. Each one carried an even 50-50 split of polar bear and grizzly genetics. But the second group of 4 told a different story. These were back-crossed hybrids, carrying roughly 75% grizzly genetics and 25% polar bear. That meant one of the original F1 hybrids had grown up and mated again, this time with a full grizzly. In other words, this family line didn't just prove hybrids could exist. It proved they could keep breeding, generation after generation, blending further into the grizzly side each time. Physically, these bears carry a genuine mix of both parent species, long polar bear-style guard hairs, but a grizzly's humped shoulder muscle built for digging, a grizzly's slightly longer claws, useful on land, but a polar bear's broader skull, built for hunting seals. Some researchers have noted their jaw structure may let them eat a wider variety of food than a purebred polar bear can. Naturally, this raised an obvious question. Why now? Why were these hybrids suddenly showing up after so many centuries of these 2 species living apart? The leading explanation ties directly to a changing Arctic. Polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt seals, their primary food source. As Arctic sea ice has thinned and retreated earlier each year, polar bears are spending more time stranded on land. At the same time, grizzly bears have been expanding their range further north, following warmer conditions and new food sources. 2 species that once rarely crossed paths were suddenly overlapping in the same territory more often than ever before. More contact meant more chances to mate, and that set off a wave of media coverage, much of it dramatic. Headlines warned of an approaching Arctic hybrid boom, entire ecosystems reshaped by crossbreeding bears. Some outlets speculated this could eventually replace the polar bear altogether. It made for a compelling story, but here's the part most of that coverage left out. In 2024, a team of researchers ran the largest genetic survey of its kind. They analyzed DNA from over 800 polar bears and grizzlies across the Arctic, using a new genetic testing tool built specifically to detect hybrid ancestry. And after sampling all of those bears, the results were almost anticlimactic. They found no new hybrids at all. Every hybrid identified in that massive survey traced back to the exact same 8 bears and the same original female, discovered years earlier. Despite years of warnings about an inevitable wave of hybridization, the data simply didn't show one. This is worth sitting with for a moment. We tend to assume that once two related species start overlapping, blending together is basically inevitable. But this research suggests something more complicated. Even with growing physical contact between polar bears and grizzlies, actual interbreeding in the wild remains extremely rare. Species barriers aren't only about genetics. Behavior, timing, and habitat preference all play a role too. Two bears can share the same stretch of coastline and still, for the most part, keep to their own kind. The Pizzly Bear captured public imagination because it's a dramatic, visual story, a living mashup of two iconic animals. But treating it as the headline risk facing polar bears may be missing the actual crisis entirely. The real threat isn't genetic dilution from crossbreeding. It's what's driving the two species into contact in the first place. Polar bear populations are already projected to decline by more than 30% over the coming decades, primarily from vanishing sea ice and the starvation that follows. Hybrid bears make headlines. A quietly starving population, stranded on shrinking ice for longer each year, does not. That's the story easy to miss underneath a viral animal. Let's bring this together. In 2006, a single unusual bear proved something scientists had long suspected was biologically possible. That single family of 8 bears is still, as far as we currently know, essentially the entire wild hybrid population. Not an unstoppable wave. Not a new species replacing the old one. Just one lineage quietly existing at the edge of 2 overlapping ranges. The more urgent story was never really about crossbreeding at all. It was about the ice disappearing underneath both species' feet. Next time you see a headline about some dramatic hybrid animal, it might be worth asking what quieter, less photogenic story is sitting just behind it. If today's story caught your interest, go ahead and hit subscribe. Next time, we'll dig into another animal story hiding behind the headlines. Take care, everyone.